Podcasting from Rome, Georgia, a beautiful little spot in the northwest corner of the state near the Appalachian Mountains. You're listening to Suburban Outdoorsman with Sean and Kevin. Join us as we chronicle our journey, attempting to go from a couple of average suburban dads to competent, skilled outdoorsmen.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Sean.
And I'm Kevin. And on today's podcast, we are going to be looking at food plots. Looking at food plots for game management, primarily white-tailed deer, but potentially some other game animals as well.
Mm-hmm. Also things about location, where's the best place to put it, what type of crop you're going to be growing, just things like that.
All right, let's get to it.
So to begin with, I was looking at the overall definition of a food plot. And in my mind, I always had a certain image of it. The more I looked into all this, it kind of expanded that. I guess that was the goal here.
The more research I did, I thought of a food plot as just basically a giant square,
right,
like a field of corn.
I was even thinking something smaller. In my mind, because I've seen them before, you can buy them on Amazon, where it's just a food plot mat.
Yeah.
You get it. It's like 5 feet wide, and you roll it out, and it's like 30 feet long. And that was in my mind what a food plot was.
And I'm guessing that's probably good for like feeding your rabbits.
Yeah. So the beginning, when I was looking at first, is overall a food plot is just an agricultural crop that you're growing to attract a specific wildlife. So it's not obviously for human produce.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to eat anything out of this, but it is something for whatever animal you're looking to attract, whether for observation, which I guess a lot of people do, because you can attract deer or anything else to your property just to observe them, or obviously what we're here for is food for hunting.
Exactly. One of the things that I found interesting when I was looking into this is that one of the things you got to take into consideration is what you're trying to attract and what you're planting, because obviously there's a lot of stuff that can attract multiple animals. It's not like there's going to be a specific crop that's geared just towards white-tailed deer.
Right. As if it's going to only attract whitetail, and then everything else is just not going to be interested in it.
And then there's some types of plants that you can get, especially if you're looking at a warm weather plot, which, we can talk about that a little bit, the difference between the warm weather and cold weather plots. But they tend to have, I think it was grain sorghum and a few other things like that will grow taller and help provide weed shade and cover, so other smaller things that you're sprouting, like I think clover was one of the small ones, or soybeans, things like that, it'll kind of help protect them, keep the weeds from growing as much, and help protect the sprouts from being attacked immediately by the deer or birds even. Yeah,
I used to have chickens, and if you plant anything in the ground, they will come by right behind you and just pick everything right up.
Yeah. So. Well, and then I thought too, again, I never really thought of a big part I found on several things I was looking up on food plots, which I did most of my research just Googling guide to creating a food plot in Georgia.
That's one way to do it.
One thing I hadn't thought about before was your soil testing.
Yeah.
And that can be an important aspect, because if you don't have the right type of soil for whatever crops you're planting, you're basically you're throwing the money away, because you're going to go buy the seeds, put all these seeds down, and if you don't have the right type of soil or the proper balance, then they're not going to grow.
See, I'm bad about that.
Yeah,
because I'm all for just throwing it out there and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
So when I read soil tests, I'm like, I don't want to go through all that step. But from what I'm seeing, it's a pretty simple step.
Yeah,
you have to follow up if you're lacking in one of those elements. Then you have to follow up and do some kind of some other additional ground prep. Whether it's.
But even that doesn't seem like it's too. I mean, you guys have the tractor.
Right.
Which we can help with some of that stuff. But from what I was reading, again, depending on whether you're more acidic or alkaline, or what your pH level, that is your pH levels. But I guess once you get into looking at your phosphorus and potassium and nitrogen and all those, there's the things you can buy, fertilizer or soil prep stuff that you can add, just spread across the ground and mix in to help create those balances.
Yeah.
One thing that I read, well, first, I was doing some searches, and I found basically, it looks like anywhere between $8 to $20 you can buy soil test kits from Amazon, Walmart, Lowe's.
I didn't follow up too much further on the soil prep thing.
In addition to the the test kits you can buy. So they, like you said, it seems pretty simple to do the test, and they're not that expensive. But granted, this won't be as detailed, but I was also finding something we could tie into science with the kids, a little school experiment with the kids for testing your pH. So I guess
I can get behind that now. As much as I didn't want to do the soil testing before, I can get behind it if it's part of the education.
Well, and that's what's cool is, so you take like two little jars, 2 mason jars, and you put a little bit of soil in each one. Mm-hmm. So the first one, you take and pour a little bit of vinegar on the soil. And if the vinegar reacts to the soil, it means you have an alkaline soil. Higher, I think it's a higher pH. It's more alkaline, if I'm remembering the order correctly. And then, so if that reacts, you don't need to do the other test in the other jar because you've already tested there. You have an alkaline soil. If it doesn't react, then what it means is you want to you'll take the other jar and you put enough water in there to, they said, get about 2 tablespoons worth of the soil wet. And then you pour baking soda on. And if the baking soda reacts, then it means you have an acidic soil.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
And if neither jar reacts, then you have a perfectly pH balanced soil. And you shouldn't need to do any additional treatments to it. So the website where I was reading that the guy tested this, he did the first jar with the vinegar and said there was no reaction, which he thought, okay, well, this is going to be bogus. It's not even going to work. Mm-hmm. But when he did the second one, he said as soon as he dumped the vinegar or the baking soda on it, it immediately started fizzling to the point where he heard it before he saw the bubbles in the.
Well, that's crazy. I never thought to test anything.
Yeah,
like that.
So that's something we can do. We can go grab some soil from a few different spots out in the areas we want to plant and add that as part of the science experiment with the kids.
Yeah.
And maybe we set it up where they can each do their own little test and record their findings of which ones reacted.
I like that.
It'd be interesting, too, to see if your soil is going to vary in different parts of the property.
Well, I imagine it would, because I know areas where there's a lot of pine trees, the pine needles, as they fall, I think they tend to be acidic. Don't quote me on that, of course. But
no, and I remember reading, and again, I don't remember whether it was acidic or alkaline, but pine needles was an example of something you could add to the soil. Yeah,
and it... I think it adds an excess of nitrogen also.
Could be. I don't know.
Don't quote me on any of this because we haven't tested it.
Yeah.
But this is the whole point of this podcast.
Exactly. So that'll be one of the first aspects actually one of the first aspects that we kind of skipped over is going to be where do we want to set up the food plots?
Right.
And is it going to be one food plot or multiple? So we need to look at that. But once we decide on those areas, we need to go do some soil tests, and then we can kind of go from there on how we need to treat the soil to adapt for that.
Yeah. The areas that I'm looking at, ideally over down by the lake.
Yeah.
The one half where I would love to have it floods frequently, so that's kind of a bad place to put it. And the other half is just on the other side of the lake. And it's dry there, but we haven't really seen much activity on that side. Yeah. Not saying that there isn't any, it might just be because it is heavy grass and we don't walk over there much, so there might be a lot of deer activity that we're just not seeing.
Yeah, because we haven't really walked through that area a whole lot.
But that'd be a good spot. It's got full sun, all the time.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I don't know, maybe a quarter acre.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
Acre,
quarter to a third, maybe. I'm not good at judging it, so I'm just
Let's just say half an acre then.
Now, did you read anything or did you have any ideas as far as specific things to look at when we're picking out areas for a food plot?
No, but that's kind of where because when you're preparing a food plot, you have to consider, all right, I'm no longer just a hunter, now I am also a farmer. So you have to go through the same steps. So it's still, the ground, is it oversaturated? Is there sun? Yeah. What's around it, the soil, all that stuff. So that's...
Well, I didn't mean that aspect. I meant as in location. In regards to accessing it. So a couple things that I...
Oh, you mean like ingress and egress? Yeah, okay.
So a couple things I was looking at is reading where when you're picking out an area is one, sometimes more internal to your property is going to be a little bit better.
Yeah.
But you also do want to look at, try and identify where the deer are currently traveling for bedding and feeding. Because if you're setting up a new food plot that's not in an area that's somewhere along the path they're already traveling frequently,
they're not going to migrate there.
Yeah, it's going to be less likely that you're going to track them to that area.
So what you want is for them, as they're walking through their natural progression throughout the day, they are slowing down in your food plot.
Exactly. Yeah. And but the other part of it is also the reason why you want to know what their migration patterns are is because even if your food plot is successful in attracting the deer, based on their travel currently is going to be when is it attracting the deer. You may get a crap ton of deer activity
at 9
but
o'clock at night.
It's not during legal shooting hours. It's only like middle of the night when it's dark outside, when they're first getting up from their bedding and traveling to their primary feeding area.
Well, that's the benefit also of making sure you have a spot where you can put a trail cam up.
Yeah.
So that ahead of time you can chart where they're walking and what time.
And I know we did the trail cam out a few times during this past hunting season, but we weren't really 100% sure on what areas we needed to be looking for that on. Now,
we put it up in some areas that we were certain there was going to be a lot of deer.
And there was nothing.
There was nothing.
Now, that's one thing to take into consideration, though, especially in the area you're talking about setting up the food plot, because when we had the trail cams out there before, we did see a lot of deer activity, a couple bucks and several doe, but those were usually in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And a few times we saw activity in the evenings, but we never actually saw anything when we sat out in the blinds.
Right.
But, out of a week of leaving the trail cam up, we had 4 or 5 nights that there were deer activity in the middle of the night and only one day that had it in the evening time.
So we were in a bad spot.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say there couldn't be more being attracted to that area if we had the food plots there at the better times, because we've seen the signs. There's a lot of deer tracks and activity that's going on in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot.
Yeah. Now, a couple other things that I was reading about in regards to access for the plot. One is going to be primarily our access to the plot.
Yeah.
Meaning we don't want to be having to cross a deer travel path. Mm-hmm. The path they would be taking to get to the food plot, we don't want to have to be crossing that when we're trying to get to our stand.
And the places I'm thinking of, it's the spots where we are always walking anyway.
Yeah.
So maybe that's too close. Just in general.
That could be a possibility of why we didn't see as much activity during the days.
Yeah. But then we've also got that one stretch that's like 4 acres, that real narrow, long one.
Yeah.
We don't really walk much there.
And see,
that's
be a good another
spot also.
Like you mentioned, the long, narrow stretch
Yeah.
was another thing I was reading, is that having necessarily a big square field is not the best aspect for setting up a food plot. Deer tend to be progressive grazers, or whatever. I don't know that that's actually the term they use.
Sure, I like it.
They will not stand in one spot and graze for a long time like a cow will, for example. They will tend to walk as they're grazing, and they'll kind of travel the course of that path of where the food is. So if you have a big square plot, they may start wherever they enter it at, say it's in the middle of one of the sides, they're just going to walk straight through to the other side and then continue moving on. They're not going to come back and make multiple passes grazing.
Yeah.
So sometimes having a narrower but longer
and this one's bordered by the wooded areas.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to channel them through.
Yep, and that was another aspect they read too, or they were talking about. If you had to clear an area, you don't want to clear everything out and get rid of it. Sometimes piling it up towards the edge of the where the plot is, adding a little bit more cover and growth will help provide a little bit more
security.
Security feeling for the deer before they come out. Potentially even adding some additional forage along the edges of the path, so it's not coming straight from for example, let's say we were doing something like soybeans and clover, which are all going to be very, very short plants with not a lot of high growth. You don't want to have the deer coming from a heavily wooded area straight out to an open clearing. They're going to be a little more hesitant to come out into that sometimes, versus if you have some wheat or corn growing towards the edges that allows them to.
I even saw sunflower.
Yes, that was another recommendation I read that was good, that it's cheap and it provides some good coverage.
And it looks pretty.
But it also attracts a lot of other animals too because of the seeds. The birds and raccoons, possums.
Something else I was looking for as far as what to plant is, like around us, especially as we're going to be coming to season where they're going to be planting corn. So if we plant corn, it's not necessarily an attractant because my neighbors
all have corn.
Plant corn.
Yeah.
So it's a better idea to plant something that they're not going to get, just as, if they happen to come through, maybe they'll take a little bit more time eating.
Yeah, but it's not going to attract them as much as it's the same thing.
So that was something else I noticed that you should pay attention to.
Yeah, and I know a big thing was a mixture of items as well. You don't necessarily have to do just one thing in the entire food plot. You can have a combination of, do some soybean seeds or some cowpeas with some sunflowers, like you said, or some grain sorghum, some wheat, things like that.
And all that would be that's stuff that you don't typically find around here.
Yeah,
we have lots of clover everywhere around our property is clover, so that's not something that's going to be an attractant either.
One other thing with the location was taking into consideration where you want to set your stand-up. Like we talked about being able to access it, but also where that's going to be in relation to
being able to hunt it.
Being able to hunt the field. You don't necessarily want to have it where the only spot is at one end or the other of your plot, especially if you're doing a longer food plot. And a couple recommendations I saw were trying to do an L or a U shape. Essentially, then you would be able to set your stand-up kind of in, either the curve of the U-shaped or the angle of the L, which would allow you to have a line of sight down both sides of the paths.
And I like that.
Accessing wherever, even if they didn't come, there's no guarantee that deer are always going to come in on the start of what you want your food plot and work their way across that entire. They may come in at the middle somewhere.
I like to think that they follow the path I've laid out for them exactly.
We should probably could, like they have deer crossing signs, so they tell the deer where to cross on the highway.
Yeah, exactly.
We could put those same signs up in the yard so that they know where they're going to go in. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand why they put the signs up and encourage deer to cross at the busiest parts of the highway, but obviously much smarter people do that than me.
I've also seen the overpasses for bears. So those people are thinking.
Yeah, exactly. If we put up a few things like that where if we direct the deer into a certain spot, that's going to attract more bear because they're going to know the deer are going to be there to eat. And then we could kill two birds, theoretically,
mammals with
one stone,
several bullets.
So that'll be the thing to look at is like you said, that one stretch may be a good area, at least to start with.
Yeah.
Now, another thing which, we can kind of do some comparing and looking at, especially if we decide areas of where there tends to be more deer activity, is I've read the thought on a couple different aspects. One of them being that some people say it's better to have several smaller food plots throughout the property because of the way that they graze. You're going to attract more to your property as a whole if there's multiple spots they can be grazing as they're traveling around. Others have said it's better to have one or two larger plots. It's better to have a half acre to 3/4 acre plot versus 3 or 4 quarter acres plots.
And I tend to agree with that more.
Yeah.
Again, because you have a lot more work if you're doing multiple plots everywhere.
Yeah.
You have to monitor each of those lots with trail cameras. You have to go back. I mean, it takes a lot more effort, and I tend to take the lazy side sometimes. Yeah. So I don't know if you've noticed. Yeah.
Never would have guessed that. So my thought would be maybe we split it as far as we have one bigger plot and maybe one other smaller plot set up somewhere.
I can manage that.
Not too far away, but maybe on a different section of the property there, so that it's.
Well, I'm okay setting one up, 80 yards out of my kitchen window.
Yeah, I would. If you could just actually get rid of the entire backyard here and create a food plot across that whole area, that would probably be the most efficient way to fill the freezer.
I've seen them down right past the fence out of my backyard.
Actually, what if?
I honestly, I'm serious. I don't mind planting one there.
Is he still going to be parking the bus back there?
No, he's done with the drive.
Okay, so we could do one in that section.
Well, I can't see that out of my kitchen window, now can I?
No, but we could put a camera up there. We could put a wireless camera up, and it's close enough that you could get there quick.
That's true.
Although the spot you were talking about is this area just on the other side, right?
I'm talking about the area just outside of my fence, where that peach tree is.
Yeah. Oh, setting up a plot there? No, but the first area that you were talking about setting up.
No, I was talking about not that spot. It's the one as we walk down to the lake. That one that's on our right side.
Oh, okay. For those of you who are listening and aren't familiar with the property, it's the one that's over on that side.
Yeah, there you go. See, everyone knows now.
Yeah. So now that'd be put one back here, where the peach tree is, and I'm pointing for your
not for the
information,
not for the viewers.
Not for the viewers. So you put one over there behind where the peach tree is, or where the peach tree is, and then we do the other one over on the other side of the lake.
Yeah.
And then maybe we do just a little small something on the other side of the lake, but over a little bit further.
Yeah.
And that gives us 3 plots, one big one with 2 smaller ones.
And are we going to plant all the same several crops?
I would think it'd be this best, we pick a couple from the research I did, and I looked up some pricing on it, so it's not overly expensive, would be doing a mixture of some soybean seeds, the grain sorghum, and cowpeas.
And stuff I was noticing with that is you can buy all this stuff online from these heavily marketed seed companies.
Yep.
That send you, the mats, or they'll send you buckets of seeds. Yeah. And it's a deer hunting. It's a big buck.
Yeah.
But they can also cost a lot more than what's necessary sometimes.
And it depends on what you're looking for. So again, I only did a comparison on one specific site. Mm-hmm. So for example,
so
soybean
it's not really a
seeds.
Comparison, though, is it?
Well, okay. Research, I should say, not comparison. Sorry. So the research I did was on one particular site. So for example, for soybean seeds, $31 and change for a 50-pound bag of seed. Now they recommend 35 pounds per acre, or a pound per 1,000 square feet. So at 35 pounds an acre, if we were going to do a 3-acre spot, then basically we'd need to buy 2 of these things of soybean seeds, which would cost us just over $60, which again is not excessively expensive.
It's not a lot, but then we're doing 3 or 4 different seeds.
So let's say $60 for that. The grain sorghum is $40 for a 50-pound bag, and that is either 5 pounds an acre if it's drilled in 30-inch rows, which I don't want to do.
Don't want to do that.
Or 15 pounds an acre if it's broadcast.
Yeah.
So even at 15 pounds an acre, if we're doing a 3-acre plot, that's 45 pounds, so a 50-pound bag is fine. So that's $40, top of the 60. We're at $100 in seeds, which again, not excessively expensive. Then you add in the iron and clay cowpea mix, which is $37 for 50 pounds. And this one, they didn't really give you an acreage, pounds per acre. They only said 3 to 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. But based on the other calculations with that, we'd still be looking at, what was it? The 50-pound bag would only cover about an acre. But we wouldn't necessarily have to do all of these things across evenly fed in all 3 acres.
Right.
So even with one 50-pound bag of that, basically we'd be looking at about $140. And that would be a variety of food. You'd have the soybeans.
Does that include shipping?
I don't remember, dude. Even still, let's say $200 total. So we split it at $100 a piece. Not that expensive for the fact of having a plot that's going to help us attract more deer.
Are all these perennials, right? Well,
no.
Yeah, those
soybeans because they're going to be eating all the seeds and stuff. I mean, they're going to be eating the plant that would be producing the seeds.
Not necessarily.
So some of it may come back, but let's just assume it's an annual.
All
right. I know you like to be lazy and cheap.
Well,
and that's not an insult.
Every year?
It's not an insult. It's taking your own words.
Well, because I saw, as far as the purchasing, if you want to make more of the phone calls instead of spending the money.
So, and granted,
there's like agricultural co-ops I saw in certain organizations that they try to help wildlife thrive.
Yeah.
And they will either give you this stuff for free or a severe discount. A lot of these co-ops will give you old seed.
Yeah. And
it still works just as well, and they'll give it to you.
I would 100% agree. That sounds like a perfect job for you to start calling to some of these co-ops and find where we can get the best deal. But think about it from this aspect. Let's just say we each spent $100. Okay. How many deer did you harvest last year?
Half of yours.
So we shared a deer last year and spent the rest of the time, I don't know how many hours worth of time, sitting in blinds looking at nothing. So for $100, to add the potential of attracting
Dozens.
A lot more, maybe even hundreds.
Might have to buy a couple more freezers when I look at it.
I mean, we could have herds of deer on our 3-acre plot. Even if it attracted 3 extra deer, that's 3 times the number of deer we got last year.
It's true.
So,
and I saw, to change topics a little bit, well, not quite change direction, but as far as the reason you're planting this, other than the attractant, the animals don't need this to live. But the benefit is, depending on what time you plant, because like I saw, if you plant in early May, that's when the bucks are starting to grow their antlers.
Yeah.
The mama deers are lactating. So
Yep.
all this stuff, it helps the young ones grow. It helps all of them get a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Bigger antlers.
Yeah.
If you want the trophy, I'm more for the meat.
Yeah.
But so
The bigger deer is more meat.
Right. So if you're planting early on, then that's kind of the benefit, is that added protein that you're ingesting into their diet.
Yeah.
It helps them grow. And if you plant later on in the year, so they have a fall plot, then that's more of, it's just an attractant.
Yeah.
That's just keeping them there. So if you keep those plots open and available for both the early season and the late season, then you'll help grow the bigger animals.
Exactly. Well, and that was part of the reason why the soybeans and I think even the cowpeas were part of the grain sorghum, was more because it is a good protein source.
Yeah.
And an attractant, but it's also one of the ones, like we were talking about earlier, that tends to grow a little bit little bit taller and helps to prevent some of the shading to protect from excessive weeds and things like that.
Yeah.
But the soybeans especially are a high protein source, and I believe so as well with the cowpea mixture. And
I think they need 15 or 16% protein in their diet.
I think when I was reading something similar about that was what their general minimum would be considered.
Yeah. So anything a lot of
times, depending, of course, on what you've got available for wild foraging around you, I think I was reading on average, though, most deer tend to get between that minimum of 12 to 15%.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're adding the food plots, you could be boosting that up into the 25 to 30% protein range, or even higher sometimes, depending on what your
bigger antlers,
bigger deer.
fawns.
Well, like you said, the does are lactating, so it helps them for the younger fawns.
I believe I said mama deer.
Oh, well, those are called does.
Okay. See, we learn something new every day.
Yeah. And the babies, which are called
fawns.
Very good. You've seen Bambi. They are, that's an important time of growth for them. And what I was reading is the first year is the most important for does or bucks in that growth time. So especially if you can be adding that into where the moms are producing a better lactation. Mm-hmm. Is that a proper word?
It is.
They have a better lactation during that first year, the early stages, and then even adding in for the baby deer to be able to be grazing from some as well as they're progressing to that is going to help keep that going. Now, another aspect of that, following on those same steps of what you were just talking about, is if we're providing this as a way to help provide a supplementation to their normal meal source, that's where we may start progressing to more and more areas as the time goes by.
Yeah.
Because the 3-acre plot, for example, is only going to support so many deer before they burn through it.
Well, and that's assuming that they're going to mow it down.
Well, it's not even just that. For example, a smaller plot isn't going to be able to support 20 deer, for example. So if you had, one thing I didn't do for our area was they recommended looking up what the estimated deer population for your area was. I guess it's calculated into how many deer per 10 square miles.
I've looked at that before.
And your food plot should break down into the 3 to 5% range. So in other words, if, I forget how they calculated it, but basically it was you wanted to look at if there were X number of deer.
There's 2,000 deer wandering our area.
This area, you wanted to. There's a calculation for it, and I didn't write it down for this, so
I'm surprised.
When we do
Mr. Numbers.
Yeah, no, I expected you to do that part, so that's fine.
That was a mistake.
We will, when we do the follow up to this, once we've actually put the plots together. I know we talked about actually on the introduction show that we probably weren't going to do a YouTube video associated with this. But I think one aspect of a YouTube video that may come into play, it's not the actual doing everything, but we may do a short little video just kind of showing the area that we set up for the food plot, the progression of it as far as what's growing out there, and maybe even putting in some video from the trail cams of what's being attracted to the area.
And during the process of the prepping and the planting and all that, we can post those pictures on the
we'll definitely share some of that on the website and social media. But I think it might be cool to have a little video to go along with.
I agree.
And then when we do the video or when we do the follow-up to this in another 6 months of how this all worked out for us, I will have looked up what the actual calculation is based on the deer population and what the recommended size is based on what your deer population is. So that looks at locations, testing the soil. We talked about what did we look at? The size and shape of the food plot, the type of food we're going to utilize, why we're doing the food plot, observation versus hunting, which obviously we want it for hunting.
Yeah, I guess when to plant.
Yeah. So we're actually in a good time now we're about the middle of April right now.
Yeah.
So that we would be doing what's considered a warm weather plot versus a cold weather. And I know you talked about that a little bit about what the difference is between the two. But from most of what I've been looking at for even these seeds that we talked about was a planting between April and July.
Okay. And one of the things I saw was you don't necessarily, again, you're not growing for human produce.
Yeah.
So you don't have to wait for these things to reach maturity for the deer to come.
Yeah, and actually...
So they'll eat it as it's sprouting.
Sometimes that's the problem.
Well, yeah, so as long as they don't mow it down,
yeah,
then, they'll eat the young stuff, and then as it grows, they'll still come back and eat it.
Yeah.
But that's another thing I was thinking about is the perennial should stay perennial because, again, they're not going to mow down the fields.
Yeah.
If they do, then we have a lot of deer, and I could care less. Because
couldn't care less.
I couldn't. Is that not said?
You said you could care less.
Dang it.
I hate when people say that.
That is my peeve, too.
Yeah. You've been listening to people too much. Now, yeah, but see, and I don't remember now the 100%. And again, obviously, just reading through this a couple times and us doing a little bit of research to start the planning phase isn't going to make us an expert.
Right.
So there will definitely be some stuff we're doing some additional research on as we're moving into the actual continuation. But
yeah, we're establishing once more that we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
All this is because we read some stuff over a few days.
We read some stuff on the internet, and now we're pseudo-experts.
Right. So when we come back after great success or no success, we'll be able to...
and when does bow season start here? September, right? Mid-September?
Yeah.
So that's what? We're in April, mid-April, May, June, July, August, September. So that's 5 months. September and October is bow, right? Gun opens end of October?
Yeah.
So if we give it another 6 or 7 months, we do a follow-up in 6 or 7 months, we'll be able to look at what we ended up doing for the plots, where we did them, what size we did, and then at least have been able to see whether we've had any success or not.
Well, and we could probably get some early success based on turkeys, because right now turkey are in season, and turkey is, golly, they're early September too.
Yeah.
So even if we are early for the deer,
yeah,
we could still get some turkey out there. And as far as the turkey hunting out there, something I thought was interesting is they're not really going to eat the plants. They might eat the sunflower.
Yeah.
If they can get the seeds off the ground. But when you have a dense collection of plants, then you've created another ecosystem, which tends to attract some more bugs.
Yeah.
So the turkey will go through there. They don't necessarily eat the plant, but they'll come through and they'll clean all the bugs out.
Yeah, and I think...
And they'll spend more time. They're unlike a deer, they will sit and they'll peck in that field for the day.
Now, there was one type of plant, and I don't remember now if it was the grain sorghum or maybe the cowpeas or if it was something else completely different. But there was... where was it? I was reading. I gotta go find it again. But anyway, it was whatever this was. They were talking about because of the fact of wanting to avoid too early of grazing and eating the shoots and not letting them get to full maturity. Mm-hmm. Whatever this one plant was, tended to have a much bitter taste until it reached maturity and started to seed. Once it started to seed, and the longer it sat there, the better taste it developed, the more attractive taste to deers and turkey and other animals like that it started to develop. But during the early stages of growth, it was a very bitter plant that was not very likely to have them grazing on it. So it was a good companion plant to plant along with something that would attract them so that you've got kind of both going at the same time.
Yeah.
So I need to look at what that was again. I do know a couple of things that I was reading as far as taking into consideration. I know soybean was one of the things we were talking about as far as what the price of seeds were and would be good. But one of the recommendations that I was reading was that unless you had the tractor equipment to allow you to drill across however many acres you're going to do for planting in rows, not to do soybeans or corn. Because those aren't really seeds you can just broadcast out and have them grow.
And we should have something. I mean, this was a working farm. They did grow corn.
Yeah.
So I guarantee one of these barns is, I don't know what the tool is called, and it's not an auger or aerator, but it's, whatever it is, it's spiky. That drags behind the tractor. I'll have to look and see. If I have that tool, I don't mind doing that. And then I would still I'm not going to plant it in each hole. I will drill the holes and then broadcast it and then see what falls in.
Yeah. And I don't think the cowpeas, I think that was one of the reasons why I'd pick cowpeas, is you don't have to do that as much. Mm-hmm. But I remember the fact that they were saying that while the cowpeas aren't as attractive to deer as soybeans, for example, that the deer still do like them. They're just not as, appealing, I guess, as the soybeans. Mm-hmm. So if you had a soybean plot or a cowpea plot, they're going to go to your soybeans first. But they are still an attractant. They provide like 20 to 22% protein, so they're a good protein source.
Yeah. And
they can withstand heavy grazing. So it's not something that's you're gonna risk being mowed through too quickly if you get a herd of deer that come through there. So again, that was one of the aspects of looking at that. So I think the next step now is, again, to reread some of this stuff so that we kind of re-solidify what exactly it is that we want to do.
And then put a plan in place.
We'll need to go pick the areas we're going to do the... you having fun there? Pick the areas that we're going to set the food plots up in, and then start doing some soil samples so that we know... Because again, even if we don't put a lot of effort into perfecting the soil as if we were a farmer who's growing crops for a living to feed our family or profit, we don't want to waste planting something that's not going to survive in an acidic or an alkaline.
I'd like to think that the soil around here, especially in these areas that we're talking about, I'd like to think it's in good shape, only because it used to be cropped, it was rotated, and then they just stopped. So it's been resting. So hopefully it's fine. I'm kind of assuming it is, but we will go through those steps just so we can chronicle it.
Yeah, we can see how it comes out soil-wise. And then we definitely will want to utilize the tractor to clear the area. Because obviously we're not going to put seeds down on top of the grass and weeds that are already growing there.
Yeah.
So I guess that'll be... one of the things we'll have to see is how the soil tests before we make any determination of whether we're going to put any other kind of topsoil down.
I don't want to do that. I suggest we hunt around until we find the good soil and plant there.
Yeah, but the problem's going to be is if we've got a spot that's great for a setup with the access for the deer to come in, for us to come in with a stand, it's a good spot for them to graze through. It's on the way between bedding and other foraging spots. But the soil's not perfect. We don't want to go to the spot that has perfect soil but is nowhere near where the deer are going to get attracted to.
You do it your way, I'll do it my way.
I don't want to repeat last year.
And I'll take half of your deer again.
So that'll be something we'll go through that, and then we can kind of from there really decide what the seeds are we're going to plant, how we're going to plant them, and then we can start monitoring whether it's going to be something, do we need to... Because another thing we didn't even talk about is... herbicides or pesticides.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those are, depending on what you're planting, one thing I was reading too is there are some of these grains and legumes that you can buy that are specifically engineered to be
bug resistant.
Not bug resistant, herbicide resistant. Yeah. So that you can spray it down with something to control the weeds, and it's not going to stunt the growth or harm these plants.
I don't think we'll have too much of an issue with weeds.
Have you seen your backyard?
Well, yeah, but the deer will, I'm assuming, will pick out what they want.
But the issue is not whether the deer are going to eat it, it's whether or not the weeds choke out what we're trying to grow. Because if the weeds are too, what's the word I'm trying to think of?
Invasive?
Invasive or too dominant, if they're growing too quickly, they're going to choke out and keep what we're trying to get to grow and sprout from even ever taking place.
We'll see. I know all that's out in these fields.
There was a parable about that.
Was there?
Yeah, you should read the Bible sometime.
Seen the movie.
So there was, but that was one of the things they were talking about, which again is also why sometimes having like corn or sunflowers, grain sorghum, some of the taller stuff that provides cover can help with that as you move on, because it's shading some of that to prevent as rapid weed growth. But that's the big, you've got to make sure that your plots are not being overtaken by weeds and choking out the good crops.
The other option is how I'm going to do my planting for my personal garden is with the mulch gardening.
Do you want to mulch a 3-acre plot?
I have access to more mulch than I know what to do with.
But do you want to spread mulch across a 3-acre plot?
Between our families, we have 6 kids.
All right.
Oh my God!
I'm going to answer that for you.
I'll spray the poison on my grass.
It's not for us. It's for the deer.
I know. And now my deer are not going to be organic anymore.
Sure they will, because you'll have plenty of time for it to have rinsed off by the time we're ready to harvest them. It'll have already worked its way through their system.
You have proof of that?
Pretty sure that's how it works. I have a feeling that that's how it works. Well, again, we still need to do a little bit of research. We're obviously not going to be experts this first time we're looking through this. So, and I'm thinking too, the more I think about it, there may be even, maybe we may not even wait another 6 months before we do a follow-up on this topic. We may not wait to do a final results follow-up on this.
We could do we put everything in the ground, and this is what we did to make these decisions.
I think it might be worth doing a follow-up again once we've actually gotten to the point where the plot has been cleared and seeds have been put down, discussing, okay, here's what we went with, here's why we did it this way and why we went with these seeds, and then the follow-up will be the culmination of these 2 episodes and whether the fruits of our labors.
And hopefully we'll be eating a nice plate of
we'll
deer steak as we're talking.
Some venison steak out here. Everybody can listen to us munching on it as we're as we're going through. All right, so what else? Did we have anything else to talk about? Did you have any other aspects?
I wanted to add that if you need help locally for your area, I know in our area we know certain things, but wherever you're at, if you want some help locally about what's a good thing to grow and when to plant, there are local experts you can find, local biology experts you can look for. I mean, you can Google all that. Yeah. But then a lot of these companies that sell seeds, they'll know what zone you're in, and they can guide you through that kind of stuff too. Yeah, and again, I didn't look at that particular aspect as much as you did, so I'm assuming you just put what state or what country. Yeah. I mean, I've got to assume we've got listeners from all over the world. Oh, easy. Why
using
not?
Google Translate to translate this into their language, so there's got to be a way for everybody across the world to be able to benefit from this. Yeah. Although I don't know that there's going to be too much of a use of a food plot in Antarctica.
Well, penguins.
Yeah. That's just sardines you throw out. Lay sardines out on the ice, and there you
go. And one of the resources I got was from bonecollector.com. Yeah. I believe it's bonecollector.com. And I got a lot of it from here. It was a 4-step process on how to do it. It's good information. It's laid out well, so very cool. Need something a bit more concise than what we're shooting out here. Yeah, and they're actually experts.
I don't think I looked at that one specifically, but I remember you talking about that. That's one I had noted down that I wanted to go do some additional research on while we plan to get started on this. So
it's a little more concise.
Yeah, and probably a little bit more scientific.
Right, they've done this before.
So I will be curious to see after all of this jibber jabber what we end up deciding to do 100% and how successful it is. Or whether or not
next month we're going to go out and buy a mat and just roll it out and hope for the best.
No, what I mean is I'm worried that it's going to end up being a
like
dud.
So many other projects.
That we're going to put all this effort into all this planning, and we're still not going to have any clue what we're doing, and we're going to go throw a bunch of seeds out, and we're going to come out the next day, and there's going to be an entire flock
of birds.
It's not. I don't think crows are called the flock.
Murder.
A murder. There's going to be an entire murder of crows eating all of the seeds that we just put down.
I do want to look into quail.
You want the quail to eat the seeds?
I want quail out here. Yeah. I don't know what that entails. If Quails. I need to, well, I don't know if they're around here. I've never seen a quail on my property. Yeah. But I would love to plant a field to do some quail hunting. Yeah.
Well, we've got doves around here. And doves are close to quail, right?
I don't know. I don't know the relationship.
No, I guess not. Never mind. I'm thinking of something different.
Pheasant would be nice, but I don't think we have pheasant in this part of the country.
Yeah. I don't know. I've read, one of the things I read too, though, is that it's not that difficult to have a multi-purpose food plot, as in attracting both deer and game birds.
Let's say if I want to do that, or if we're going to put a plot down, I want it to be multi-spatial.
Multi-purpose?
Multi-spatial.
Multi-spatial. That sounds like a good word.
That's what I said. That's why I said it.
I thought you said multi-spatial, like multiple spaces all combined into one. All right, so I think that is going to cover where we sit right now in the planning phase. So the next step is going to be actually going out in the field and doing some research into the actual spots we're going to do this. So I would say maybe another 2 or 3 months, we'll do a follow-up to this on what we looked at, what areas of the property we looked at, and where we decided on. Again, not that the location itself is going to make much of a difference to the listeners, but more the aspects of what the surrounding areas were like and why we picked the areas we did, and how we started prepping the soil and how we got it ready to go.
But we'll definitely have another show before then.
Yep. So we will be back with the next one looking at Firecraft.
Did we decide on that? Okay.
I did.
You did. Wonderful.
Yeah, and you didn't really give me an opinion on it, so we just decided to settle with that.
And we have a family camping trip coming up, but that'll be before.
Yeah,
we'll have to put out an episode before.
Yeah, because the family camping trip, we're at the middle of April right now. That's going to be the end of June, right?
Oh, so that's a ways from now.
Yeah, that's
okay.
About another between 2.5 months away.
Well, that's moot then.
So yeah, that one we are going to do the 3-part series like we talked about before. We'll do the first episode looking at what it is we're trying to learn about and what the plans are. Then we'll do the YouTube video of us actually testing out some of these items. And then the third episode, which will be another podcast, will be
the implementation.
The final results of everything. So we'll get into that. Obviously, on the actual episode, we'll discuss what the aspects of Firecraft are we're going to look into and provide a little more detail on that. So
I'm looking forward to that one.
I think that'll wrap it up for us today.
That's all I've got.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see you next week.
See you then. We hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode. If you'd like to show us support, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast as well as leave a comment. Also, you can swing over to our website at suburbanoutdoorsman.com, as well as all of our social media accounts. They all have exclusive content as well as additional information on your hosts, Sean and Kevin, and our individual journeys that led us here.